So we did an experience with light, and instead of it being an experience of consciousness, it just activated a dissociative episode. So I'm taking this opportunity to try and put language to this indescribable experience of consciousness. The elements involved were a pressure in the muscles in my head, kind of in here, and then going inward. A constricting tension. And that was followed by a pain in my chest. And we took some written notes as well. And that was followed by a different kind of constriction down here. Yeah, my shadow's blocking it. My left abdomen area. And once I realized that the experience was activating a trauma response, it wasn't just, your ordinary tension as part of a new experience where your body's like trying to orient itself or whatever. I tried to move my hand over my eyes to signify that the experience was too much. And that was even a hard thought to get to, because a part of me was like, I paid for this experience, other people think it's cool, so maybe just give it a shot. And then there's other much more subtle parts of me being like, hello, you're feeling something, listen to it. So there was a fragmentation in thought forms, where the thought forms were being strongly, noticeably, individually activated without access to the other parts of consciousness. And that alone should have been a clue, but my ability to assess thoughts was decreasing. So I was just like, breathe, observe, you're here. And by the time we decided we probably should put our hand over our eyes, we mentally said, hand, begin moving towards our face. And there was this interesting realization that I had no feeling in my hand. I could not tell where my hand existed in time and space. I could not feel that I had a right hand. I feel like I could kind of feel like my left hand existed, but I couldn't get to it. Although, come to think of it, we technically really only tried to move our right hand. So potentially that could actually be explained by a disconnect in things where the thought form of description and action would only be able to come from the left brain hemisphere. That's just a theory, but it makes sense. Makes sense as to why we were not even able to try to move our left hand, because the conceptual thought organization of requesting hand movement would have been directed to my dominant hand directly from my language center area of the brain, the left brain, so right hand. So felt like our right hand did not exist, like at all, like it wasn't even there. And I thought, okay, let's decrease the demands. We don't need to move our entire limb up and over, because we're laying down. So we don't need to move our entire limb up and over. Let's just start by rolling the wrist. You couldn't do that. All right, let's take it down a notch. Let's start by just moving the fingers. Let's just wiggle one finger. Couldn't do that. realized we were stuck in the experience without a way out, immediately reframed, knowing that if the perception was of us being trapped, neurophysiological responses of being trapped would be activated. And we didn't need another traumatic stress experience. So we said, okay, we're not trapped. We are just having an experience, and it's unique, and it's not exactly what we hoped for, but maybe we can be present with it anyway. So we practiced. Practice is our power. Perspective is our power. Presence is our power. So we stood in our power, even though our chest pains and our vagus nerve was constricting and signaling danger, and we had no feeling in our body and we couldn't move, and there were these really intense pressures as muscles constricted in our head and face, and a disconnect in thought forms. And the more the experience continued, the more thought forms seemed to only come from guardian parts, where the sense of playfulness was not all that accessible, and kind of that passive acceptance sense of, it's just an experience, we're just here, I'm just observing, and someone else is having an experience next to me, which would be like normal part where you're just kind of observing and you're not really having emotions and you're not really, whatever. And then the submissive not part of, I'm just submitting to where I am without exerting myself, asserting myself, I should say. And the nightingale part of, but I feel bad, like my friend paid for this experience, like I want to appreciate that. And so there's actually that thought would probably be more Moppet submissive than nightingale, come to think of it, more attempt at embodying love, receiving love, than of giving love. Although it could be either or, giving an appreciation for the experience. It could be either one. So those thoughts kind of became less dominant. At first they were all swirling around, collectively yet separately. And so as the experience progressed, it was much more just guardian parts of, oh my God, this is awful. This is fucking awful. I fucking hate existing. Humans suck. And we're orienting ourselves for the first time since the experience is a good sign of our neurophysiology, kind of hesitantly creating a willingness to engage again. Oh, and there comes some facial muscles. Great, excellent. Yep, the eye rubbing, particularly with right brain limbs. And here comes the follow-up. The left brain limbs. This is all pretty unconscious. My body and my mind and my visual perception all have different experiences. They completely separate from one another. In dissociative encounters of experience through consciousness. And so we focused on our imagination, and if we could bring a familiar space, a fictional reality into our experience, there was a decreased sense of terror. So that's a clue. Coping with dissociative experiences. If you can't get to your physical reality of the present moment, you can imaginatively, creatively, subconsciously pull in experiences that are aspects of a reality, but not this reality. So whether you're making something up, or you pull in a scene from a television show, a cartoon, an image that your mind created while you were reading a book. It could really be anything. But sometimes in a dissociative state, it's easier to pull in an image than to just create one. That's what we had to do. So we pulled in an image of a TV show, and it was able to come to mind because we had verbally spoken about the TV show today. So it was consciously accessible, whereas experiences farther away in the consciousness would not have been. Now that I'm starting to return, I feel a lot of funny sensations in my body. Kind of like everything is squiggly. Like instead of being a physical composition of a person, I feel like my whole body is doing a wave where I am a cartoon character and someone is playing me like a rubber band, just like pulling me, and I'm like wiggling with some vibration in a pattern, but a nonsensical pattern. I feel a little bit nauseous, a little bit dizzy, a bit lightheaded. And this is probably like, if I had to guess, maybe like 30 minutes after the experience, roughly. And the experience was 30 minutes long. Traumatic response, traumatic stress, and dissociation are all things we will clarify, define, and explore. I feel a strange resting sensation to my head and face, kind of like a growing pressure, where I feel like losing consciousness, but I don't want to. I stepped on a leaf as I stood up, and I full body jumped from the sound. My physical processing and my auditory processing through my mental perceptual processing are not connected. Like internal, external reality in the body connected through a perception of mind. Observing both. Not collaborating information. This is a core aspect of dissociation or dissociative experiences of consciousness. Let's see if I can. Better than it was. We're still not fully there though. Couldn't recognize myself. Tried grabbing the mirror and peeking, and it was just like immediate desire to look away. There was just no resonation with what I was seeing. No connection between my mind and my body. So, early signs of dissociation may include bodily tensions, such as constrictions in facial muscles, constriction in the chest area, minor to severe. It could just be a slight pain that you dismiss, or it could be like an all-consuming, you think you're gonna have a heart attack and die feeling. Constriction in this lower left abdomen area. It could be anywhere from like here on the side to here, kind of in the front middle, up in here. Anywhere in this kind of general region. That's the left side of the abdomen. And that constriction might feel less like just a general tension and more like a fist balling up. It's a little bit different type of constriction that I felt in than what I felt in the chest. Maybe we could even create some fun terms to describe these sensations in the body if they don't already exist. You can explore somatic language. Let's see, what else? Oh, and then recovering from a dissociative episode. People don't know what kind of questions to ask or how to engage someone in a dissociative episode. And when in a dissociative episode, there is no way to offer that extension because you can't get to it physically yourself, or mentally, or physiologically. You can't get to it. So I wanted to try to give some pointers to explore that. So a few questions that someone could ask when in a dissociative episode. Can you feel your feet on the ground? How long can you breathe in and out? Like, how deep is your breath? Let's count it out. And then once you count it out, it's, can you deepen your breath? Can you make it deeper if you try to? Yeah, the experience of the surrounding world really changes in dissociation. The depth of it is both constricted and expanded simultaneously. It feels two-dimensional in the sense of life lacks depth. And moving through time and space, there's not this concept of moving through it or the mind moving with the body through the experience of it. While simultaneously the perception of the surroundings just kind of goes on. There isn't an understanding that the tree that I'm looking at exists right there. It kind of just exists somewhere in space, but there's no real specification of orientation of time and space with physical person or physical things, particularly physical person in relation to physical things. And that can feel scary, overwhelming, disorienting. Scary, overwhelming, disorienting. Those are really the best words. It can feel isolating, knowing that the person you're nearby is not experiencing the world the same way and doesn't understand that you're experiencing this. And there's really no way to describe what you're experiencing because it is an indescribable experience of consciousness. That was a fun sound. That was fun. That was a fun sound we just made. People in the general vicinity can feel intimidating or threatening or both. There's kind of this disconnect from the social engagement system so that the natural ability to understand self in relation to others has more than dissolved, because when it dissolves, a lot of times there's kind of still a memory of it and a desire for it. But this was much more of a place of it doesn't actually exist even in potentiality. And there was maybe less of a connection of the knowing that I am a person. Maybe more of a, I feel like I'm a little squirrel on the ground and I should run away so that I don't get stepped on. So maybe a distortion in the perception of physical self, a distortion in the perception of mind in relation to the physical self within the world, like my mental perception of this existing here. Yeah. And then a couple things I wanted to share. One would be how an individual can come back, and then others how someone can help an individual come back. So helping yourself through dissociation is about reframing the experience. Because if you become afraid, and when I say you, I'm talking about myself or others who might relate with this sort of experience. Hard time saying I'm still not fully back. But when you, yes, you, when you are having a dissociative experience, you can reframe the experience. Because if you respond with a sense of fear, panic, or terror, then the fear wins and the dissociation increases. But if there can be presence, just observing the disconnect as it is and not forcing it to be something different than it is, because trying to force something is a fear-based energy, which will also worsen the dissociation and create a difficulty in returning to a lucid state of consciousness. And so resisting it, trying to change it, trying to control it, judging it, being afraid of it, over-identifying with it, feeling overwhelmed by it, all of those things are just going to forfeit the potential power you have to move through the experience. And the experience will overwhelm your nervous system, and you will not have power. And so reframing the experience by disidentifying from it, observing it, letting go of judgment of it, extending love through it, can actually help. Not necessarily through an immediate shift, but it does help, I promise. Pinky promise. Letting go of what caused the experience also, because that's a judgment and a fear and something focused on a past moment instead of the present moment. And all of those things are also going to forfeit power in regaining access to present reality. So, observing it, disidentifying from it, letting go of judgment of it and whatever caused it. And it doesn't mean that we kind of just like apathetically give up. It doesn't mean we're just like, oh, well, this just happened. Okay, I'm just dissociated. But actually being present and just saying, yes, this happened. Like acknowledging it without running from it. Acknowledging it without judging it. Acknowledging it without being upset with it. Observing it as an aspect of experience and not an aspect of your identity. Like who I am is not defined by this sensation, even though it feels very all-consuming. And so just creating space to be present with it. No judgment, no over-identifying, no pointing fingers. Well, I wouldn't be in this situation if X, Y, Z. And again, not because there isn't, like it's not because we don't validate the things that happened, but simply because that thought process will increase the fragmented dissociative experience neurophysiologically. It's for your own well-being that you let go of the focus of what caused it, what got you here, what you're feeling, and not letting go of it in a way that you pretend it didn't happen, but in a way that you acknowledge it without reacting to it. And I know it's tough, but it is a practice that can be cultivated, and then you have power no matter what dissociation you're experiencing. And that's worth fighting for. Having power regardless of the dissociative experiences so that you can heal yourself from the inside out of your consciousness and transform your unfolding life experience even with chronic dissociation, that's worth fighting for. Like, you are worth fighting for. You don't need to give up on yourself just because the experiences are intense and all-consuming and isolating. So, Once we're in that space of observing it, without reacting, without judging, without disconnecting, without over-identifying, etc., 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 then there can be a redirection. How can I play? And it doesn't have to like feel like you're playing. It's not like, oh yeah, this is so much fun. How pleasurable, how enjoyable. That's not the kind of fun and play, or that's not the kind of play I'm talking about. I'm talking about imaginative play. I'm talking about allowing yourself to pull in ideas that are not automatically coming up and trying to feed energies of realities beyond the immediate one. And this can look like pulling in concepts from memories, pulling in concepts from dreams or fictive experiences like reading a book or watching television. Extracting from maybe positive memories. What else can it look like? It can look like just creating a landscape in your mind's eye that is something you intentionally redirect towards rather than the automated experience of the mental landscape. And so we played with imagining the void from season 3 of The Good Place. Highly recommend that show. And so we kind of tapped into that, and this really scary, intense, overwhelming experience we were having, we played with it. We thought, okay, let's pretend it's the void and there's a strobe light dance party right now. And we played with it. And again, it doesn't have to feel like play, because your feelings are part of the experience, but playfulness can be part of your power. So that no matter what the experience is, you can focus on your power, an energy that is more substantial than the ever fluctuating, beyond all control experiences of life. And so playfulness doesn't have to feel like a fun, enjoyable, pleasurable sense of play for it to be effective play. It's more about tapping into the power of your imagination and creating space to concoct new realities. Like, okay, if I can't get back to this present physical reality, then what kind of reality can I play with in here, since I'm stuck in here anyway? Kind of a concept-ish. And this is where a daily meditation practice can be handy, because sometimes you can practice play in that setting, and it can be tools you bring in with you in the day-to-day life as you proceed through the unknowns of existence. So, grounding in the breath, disidentifying, observing, letting go of judgment, just bringing awareness to the lack of external awareness or whatever. And then playing with perspectives. So playfulness and perspectives are 2 of the 10 aspects of personal power. If you can focus on your power, you're not just coping with the dissociation. This is the cool part. This is the really cool part. You're not just coping with the dissociation. This isn't just another gimmicky coping trick to like survive the moment. This is an energetic planting of seeds that actually helps to rewire the dissociative tendencies of your neurophysiological applications of consciousness. It's healing. Not just temporary. Not just, I hope I get back to the moment sometime before the day or week ends. Like, it's planting seeds to rewire your brain long term so that dissociation doesn't run your whole life. So this process, there can really be a shift of experience. And again, it might not be immediate, but you're planting seeds. You're growing cognitive capacities of consciousness. You're planting these energetic seeds to rewire your subconscious neural pathways. You're fighting for the rainbow of life that you are worthy of. And that is so substantial that it doesn't have to feel good to proceed through it. Does that make sense? It doesn't have to be some enjoyable, pleasurable, oh yay, I feel better kind of feeling experience. It can be a, I'm healing deeply in this moment, and it's feeding my long-term growth and well-being and health and recovery of the self that I'm worthy of experiencing. And, you know, it's really tough right now, but I'm worth it. Kind of a growing process. And there are those small victories where you're like, hey, I survived that with a little bit less terror than most dissociative episodes. I survived that with where I recovered a little bit quicker than last time. I got through that, and I actually had an ability to influence it rather than be completely subjected to the experience. And so those little victories, those little nuggets you get to take with you that help to revive that hope within your being. And then back to the ways that other people could potentially help in a dissociative episode. Short questions focused on, and by short I mean not needing like a generalized explanation. Like if you say, how are you feeling? I can't get to the words to describe how I'm feeling at that moment. And even if I could, I don't know that you'd even understand what I'm saying. And it wouldn't be enough information to actually help change things. And that actually brings me back full circle to another thing. Ideally, and this is what I'm doing now, it's after being stuck in that experience ended. Once I regained the ability to move my body, but I wasn't actually in my body, is putting language to the experience, describing what happened. Because when you put language to implicit sensations, it actually does something healing to the dissociation. You're connecting your language centers with your sensational aspects of experience. You're connecting your descriptive, observing front brain with your sensational, reactive, implicit back brain or hind brain. And you're bringing your awareness back to presence, and you're giving language to these unconscious aspects of experience, and you're connecting with more aspects of yourself, and you're creating space for yourself, and you're hopefully extending some compassion and grace towards aspects of yourself through the experience. And trying to move through it rather than to get over it or, bypass it or whatever might be coming up. Because only when we move through something do we actually start to heal. If we're trying to move around stuff or over stuff, we're not healing. But once we are willing to move through it, the thing that we're going through can actually change. And so part of my experience afterwards, after the event, I describe what happened during, right? But afterwards, difficulty moving my limbs. I could not do this. I was kind of scuffling along. I didn't have a lot of motor function in my limbs. I didn't have a lot of conscious muscular engagement. I did not have a lot of conscious muscular engagement within my body. I could not move my facial muscles. I'm still struggling a little bit. I'm normally much more expressive. I had a difficult time engaging my vocal cords, and I think you can see that a little bit at the beginning of this video, although I don't remember the beginning of this video all that well. And so my facial muscles were struggling to engage. My vocal cords were very flat, monotone. I couldn't bring a deeper exhalation to my vocal vibrational creation of sound. Like my friend asked if I could shout, and I was like, no. He's like, can you try? And I'm like, I can barely talk. Like, it feels like it's just taking all my energy to be like, no. I felt very energetically drained. I felt very zoned out. Like I couldn't really focus my eyes on things intentionally, and if I did, I felt like I wasn't really seeing whatever I was looking at. And that's kind of part of my working theory, is that dissociation, especially in a severe state of it, can be the eyes are seeing one thing, the mind is having an experience, and then the rest of the body is having an experience, and they're all separated. They're not connecting informational processing. So the body's kind of just out here being super unconscious. My eyes are just here not being able to mentally connect to what the physical eyes are seeing, and my mind is back here, just this isolated fragment of consciousness without a physical existence in any capacity. And so I had a hard time moving my limbs. I had a hard time consciously engaging my muscles. I had a hard time speaking things. I had a hard time communicating. I struggled to create words. I struggled to respond. And more than anything, I struggled to initiate. Like there was no initiative engagement. I could kind of respond somewhat in a very dissociative way, but I could not do that. I couldn't orient myself, I couldn't choose where I was looking, and I could not initiate contact. Like physically. Like not just like, oh, that feels scary in my mind, but I'm talking like physically. Like I physically could not do that. Physically in my body. And that's a very important part of validating the dissociative experiences. Like, it's not just in my mind. I don't need to just get over it. I can't go around this experience. This is, it's here. It's all of this. It's not just a concept. It's happening from head to toe. And so I couldn't be a person existing here. And I think a lot of it is from that disconnect of informational processing. Because if my inner perception of mind is not connecting with my physical interpretation of where I am, and both of those separated things are not communicating and connecting with this mobility and expression of my physical reality, the sense of self becomes dissolved. Only when these three layers of things come together can there be this active engagement of self. In theory, you could even connect your mind with your conscious awareness, your eyes with your subconscious parts, and then your body with your unconscious states. And we come back to these three layers of consciousness comprising life experience from the inside out of your being. And so coming back full circle around to ways people could help potentially. So I'm sitting here, I'm having this dissociative experience. I'm not a real person. My thoughts are fragmented. I'm having a hard time observing them. What my eyes are seeing aren't really connecting with what I'm feeling in my body or what I'm experiencing in my mind. My body is struggling to understand itself because this stuff really only makes sense when we're perceiving it through that mental interpretation of awareness. And so my body's just kind of out here on its own. And I recognize these things, and it's very easy to slip into a place of judgment. And so instead of trying to push through, instead of trying to get over it, instead of trying to go around it, instead of trying to rely on something else, I just needed to create space to put language to the experience and hope that I could find my way back to reality. And it's taken years to cultivate these experiences. It's a practice, and practice is part of our power. It's one of the 10 components of personal power. But as my friend is sitting here, what's something that he could have done? And I'm curious about this. Making eye contact is a big one. And to know that the person is not avoiding eye contact with you. The person literally is not mentally existing within the eyes. There's a big difference of experience, and if the outside person can understand that about the inside of this other person, there can be a connection through the disconnect in theory. It really depends how much you deeply trust the person you're with and stuff. If there isn't that deep trust, then it could be too vulnerable feeling to come back from the disconnect, because it is a very scary sensation, and to try and encourage a breakthrough can feel daunting and overwhelming, a bit intimidating, because things are just kind of scary and not getting processed, and it's a bit disorienting and weird, and the vulnerability is a little bit scary all on its own. And so it kind of depends on your relationship with the person that is in the vicinity during this dissociative episode. But in theory, eye contact can really be beneficial, but the outside person needs to compassionately understand that this person is not avoiding eye contact. This person is not consciously avoiding or disconnecting or choosing not to engage. And when eye contact is forced, like not like look at me, but like a gentle leaning in, and maybe a gentle hey, just that gentle invitation, if you will, for eye contact engagement without requiring a lot of movement from the other person, because it might not be physically possible. That invitation for engagement of eye contact can potentially be very grounding, as it reconnects physical experience through mental experience, or with mental experience through the physical eye processing system. So that's one. As far as a gentle somatic sensation. So we have this little like head scratcher thing. And this helped a little bit earlier. There was kind of a brief moment where we were able to breathe slightly deeper. So like a head scratcher. Another even better one is a feather. And using tools are great, because direct hand to skin contact could just be fear-inducing rather than reassuring, because of the disconnect being experienced unconsciously through the neurophysiological applications of consciousness beyond direct awareness. So there's not even an awareness of the unconscious experience, it's just happening. And so using tools can really help, because you're making contact but through a medium that is less threatening yet still engaging. Just wait for that to pass. We can withstand the vibrations though. Last time that passed over, we had to cover our ears. I vaguely remember that. And that's the other thing. Working short-term memory kind of glitches out for a little bit, and you're allowed to kind of just know that without judging it. And if the person around can understand that, that can be helpful, because when you start to come back, it might be like, where am I? How'd I get here? And to have an internal understanding, hey, my brain processing system of working short-term memory kind of just left me for a little bit, and it's on its way back to me. So I don't really need to know what just happened, but I'm glad I'm here now. Kind of just mental processing factor, just to understand what is happening as it occurs, so that it's a little bit less scary, because you can describe it to yourself. And for the external person to have an understanding of that. So when there is kind of a look of confusion or whatever, it's nothing personal, and they can kind of take that opportunity to explain, this is where you are, this is what's happening, everything's okay. We were over there, we kind of walked over here, and now we're here, and everything's okay. And so working short-term memory shuts down. Where were we before the plane? Using tools, using mediums to make somatic sensational contact, because the somatic sensation can connect with subconscious parts through the unconscious states. And if there's this observational awareness, because it is a tender, sensational, non-threatening, potentially even somewhat pleasurable experience, the conscious awareness is more likely to connect and notice it instead of like disconnecting from it. And so to have the conscious awareness observing these sensations through the unconscious states, it's bringing those three states back together. Your mind, your eyes, and your body that are separated, having these separate experiences, start to be united again. So having a medium tool for somatic contact without using the physical
body directly to make contact with your dissociative friend. So eye contact, somatic sensation through a medium, a tool. And then questions. The questions are going to be less effective. But if anything, it would be a gentle yes or no, like, can you choose where your eyes are looking? Do you feel like your mental processing understands what your eyes are seeing? Kind of just things to bring awareness to the experience in a non-threatening way, and in a way that can just be a yes or no answer, not requiring an in-depth answer, complex answer. Because words can be really hard in dissociative experiences of consciousness. And then, yeah, those kind of awareness questions. And then just kind of, what can you feel in your body? Can you feel the deepening of your breath? How many seconds are you breathing in and out for? Can we make those seconds a little bit longer, and demonstrating it, practicing breathing through it to demonstrate that. Those would kind of be my best tips. And then anytime there can be language put to the experience, anytime there can be a reunion between the mind, subconscious, and unconsciousness, it can really transform the experience.